Okay, so far we've been discussing the social identity group as the basic building block of complex societal systems. And in doing so, we focused on the human individual as a member of a social group. Everything that humans do, they do at the individual level. And that we can only refer to group behavior as individuals work in concert or in disconcert, working with each other, working against each other. And so we have cooperation, we have conflict. The political space that we've been dealing with has been flat. It's been two-dimensional. It has the third dimension of time, so it changes over time. But we've been focusing on the nature of relationships amongst individuals in the group, emphasizing the trade-off between associational and instrumental strategies of intermember interactions within the group and how these can be coordinated by the proto-state or the societal elite, who have influence and connections to a greater number of individuals than other individuals within the group. And they do this largely through institutions, through the elaboration of the social norm, the rule set, the rule of law. What we're going to get into is a series of diagrams now that add a third dimension to the political space. And I'm calling this third dimension circumstantial. I've already mentioned that groups form with different characteristics, not because they differ on the two basic dimensions of interactive strategies, but on their own circumstances, their interests, their situations, their environment, their climate, the resources available to the group. And so we have a diversity of individuals based on their dispositions on how to interact with other group members. We also have a diversity of interests and a diversity of circumstances that lead to the formation of multiple groups. And so part of the resilience of complex societal systems is that the systems themselves involve multiple social groupings. And I've already mentioned that individuals can be members of more than one group, that they communicate across groups. And so we're going to emphasize intergroup interactions in the next sequence of models and diagrams. In doing so, we'll look at minor differences in groups that regularly interact. And so we're still dealing with a basic form of social identity, but instead of looking at the simple form of identity with a single group, we're going to look at group interaction into a complex societal system. Let's take a moment to outline the basic parameters of the societal system conceptual space within which intergroup interactions take place. Historically, social identity groups formed and developed relatively independently and even in isolation from other groups. As such, they tended to distinguish themselves with unique norms, customs, language, and identity markers that emanated from their experiences in regard to their particular circumstances. Over time, social identity groups came into contact with one another and interacted. With limited contact, individual members of different groups would have difficulty communicating, comparing experiences, sharing knowledge, and identifying common interests. Under conditions of competition over resources and high levels of uncertainty, intergroup strategies would tend to favor a conservative approach, that is, to presume contention and act strategically to maximize gains and or minimize losses vis-a-vis the other group. When social identity groups come into contact, they do so within a politically relevant societal systemic conceptual space. This conceptual space is defined by the four dimensions already discussed in this video series. Instrumental, the x-axis highlighted in red, associational, the y-axis here highlighted in blue, circumstantial, z-axis highlighted here in green, and the temporal dimension, the element of time. Pertinent to this conceptual representation of social interaction is the point of instrumental neutrality, which in the three-dimensional space is presented as a plane, here highlighted in purple. With more regular contact, group interactions in some cases would tend toward greater integration as interactions became more regularized and less uncertain. In order to integrate effectively, two separate identity groups would need to combine effort so as to self-actuate the formation and organization of a higher order, supra-ordinate social identity group that would be able to organize, regulate, and correct collective action across and including constituent groups. In this way, groups would be understood to engage in a political integration process. While political integration is an important intergroup dynamic related to the societal development process and increasing social complexity, a second important dynamic can be explained as a specialization process, whereby the societal development process induces the formation of special interest groups that focus attention and effort on particular activities within the greater social identity group. Thus, the development process can be viewed as increasing group complexity through both combination and delegation dynamics to better organize members and manage conflicts. The optimal circumstances for both integration and specialization dynamics in complex societal system development are characterized by the condition of instrumental neutrality, or congruence. That is, when groups are aligned at the proactive point of relative or relational zero. So, the key to understanding intergroup cooperation and contention is the distinction in individual dispositions between in-group and out-group attitudes. Things are relative to group membership for the individual, that how one interacts with a group in which it feels it's a member can be quite different to their attitudes in how best to interact with members of a separate group, a group in which they're not necessarily a member. Or they may have relations with members in the other group, but the group is really seen as a difference between the in-group, the group that they are a member of, and the out-group, the group that they are not a member of, at least in terms of the issue that's defining the interaction at hand. So, an individual can have a proactive, non-coercive disposition towards in-group members, and this is conducive to group cohesion, coherence, and persistence. But they can also have an active or reactive, relatively coercive disposition towards rival outgroup members, or a rival outgroup itself, as a personification of individuals who are members of that particular external or outgroup. Intergroup contention, then, and intergroup cooperation must be mediated by a superordinate proactive group whose immediate interest lies in finding a political accommodation that will serve to integrate and maintain the integration or reintegrate groups that have become contentious. So we have groups that line up on the relative zero, which now extends through the circumstantial dimension, or they can diverge from that central tendency, that systemic norm, as you will, to find themselves in conflict and contention with other groups that see themselves as having a membership in the larger order group. So groups can form at different levels of organization, if the larger organization has social norms that are compatible with the interests, values, and the social norms of the smaller groups, this leads to a political integrative dynamic. If they are not served by the larger group norms, their membership and their loyalty to that association with the larger group comes into question. And so this dynamic process of conflict and cooperation among social groups also exists as a dynamic in the societal system.